Prevention of surgical infection. Preoperative preparation. A short preoperative hospital stay lowers the risk of acquiring MRSA, multidrug-resistant coagulase-negative staphylococci and other antibiotic-resistant organisms from the hospital environment. Medical and nursing staff should always wash their hands after any patient contact. Hand gels containing at least 70% alcohol can act as a substitute for hand washing, but do not destroy the spores of C. diff, which may cause pseudomembranous colitis, especially in immunocompromised patients or those whose gut flora is suppressed by antibiotic therapy. Although the need for clean hospitals, emphasized by the media, is logical, the Clean Your Hands campaign, particularly in the COVID-19 era, is beginning to result in falls in the incidence of HAIs. Staff with open, infected skin lesions should not enter the operating theaters. Ideally, neither should affected patients, especially if they are having a prosthesis implanted. Antiseptic baths, usually chlorhexidine, are popular in Europe, but there is no hard evidence for their value in reducing wound infections. Preoperative skin shaving should be undertaken in the operating theater immediately before surgery, as the SSI rate after clean wound surgery may be doubled if shaving is performed the night before, because minor skin injury enhances superficial bacterial colonization. Scrubbing and skin preparation. When washing the hands prior to surgery, dilute alcohol-based antiseptic hand soaps such as chlorhexidine or povidone iodine should be used, and the scrub should include the nails, figure 5.1. One application of a more concentrated alcohol-based antiseptic is adequate for skin preparation of the operative site. This leads to a greater than 95% reduction in bacterial count, but caution should be taken not to leave a pool of alcohol-based fluid on the skin, as it could ignite with diathermy and burn the patient, figure 5.1. Theater technique and discipline also contribute to low infection rates. Numbers of staff in the theater and movement in and out of theater should be kept to a minimum. Careful and regular surveillance is needed to ensure the quality of instrument sterilization, aseptic technique and theater ventilation. Laminar flow systems direct clean, flood air over the operating field, with any air potentially contaminated as it passes over the incision, then directed away from the patient. Operator skill in gentle manipulation and dissection of tissues is much more difficult to audit, but dead spaces and hematomas should be avoided. There is no evidence that drains, incision drapes or wound guards help to reduce wound infection. There is a high level of evidence that both the perioperative avoidance of hypothermia and the use of supplemental oxygen during recovery significantly reduce the rate of CIS. Prophylactic antibiotics. Prophylactic antibiotics are used when there is a risk of wound contamination with bacteria during surgery. The theoretical degree of contamination, proposed by the National Research Council, USA, over 40 years ago, relates well to infection rates, table 5.2. The value of antibiotic prophylaxis is low in non-prosthetic clean surgery, with most trials showing no clear benefit because infection rates without antibiotics are so low. The exception to this is where a prosthetic implant is used, as the results of infection are so catastrophic that even a small risk of infection is unacceptable. There is undisputed evidence that prophylactic antibiotics are effective in reducing the risk of infection in clean contaminated and contaminated operations. When wounds are heavily contaminated or when an incision is made into an abscess, a 5-day course of therapeutic antibiotics may be justified on the assumption that the wound is inevitably infected, and so treatment is needed rather than prophylaxis. If antibiotics are given to prevent infection after surgery or instrumentation, they should be used before bacterial growth becomes established, i.e. within the decisive period. Ideally, maximal blood and tissue levels should be present at the time at which the FRST incision is made and before contamination occurs. Tissue levels of the antibiotic should remain high throughout the operation, and antibiotics with a short tissue half-life should be avoided. Intravenous administration at induction of anesthesia is therefore optimal, as unexpected delays in the timing of surgery may occur before then and antibiotic tissue levels may fall off before the surgery starts. In long operations or when there is excessive blood loss, or when unexpected contamination occurs, antibiotics may be repeated at 4-hourly intervals during the surgery because tissue antibiotic levels often fall faster than serum levels. There is no evidence that further doses of antibiotics after surgery are of any value in prophylaxis against infection, and the practice can only encourage the development of antibiotic resistance. The choice of an antibiotic depends on the expected spectrum of organisms likely to be encountered, which will depend on the site and type of surgery and whether the patient has any antibiotic allergies. Hospitals in the UK and across Europe now have standardized antibiotic prophylaxis policies that take account of the above factors and are only deviated from with microbiological advice. Patients with known valvular disease of the heart, or with any implanted vascular or orthopedic prosthesis, should have prophylactic antibiotics during dental, urological or open viscous surgery to prevent bacterial colonization of the valve or prosthesis during the transient bacteremia which can occur during such surgery. Antibiotic prophylaxis. Filled circle not required in clean surgery unless a prosthesis is implanted. Filled circle use antibiotics that are effective against expected pathogens within local hospital guidelines. Filled circle planned for single shot intravenous administration at induction of anesthesia. Filled circle repeat only during long operations or if there is excessive blood loss. Filled circle patients with heart valve disease or a prosthesis should be protected from bacteremia caused by dental work, urethral instrumentation or visceral surgery. Postoperative wound infections. The majority of wound infections arise from endogenous sources within the patient, but exogenous cysts may also occur. From bacteria present in the ward or on staff and so can be related to poor hospital standards. Strict attention to ward cleanliness, gloving before touching patient wounds and hand washing between all patient contacts are important preventive measures. An outbreak of wound infections on the ward with bacteria having the same antibiotic sensitivity profile implies an exogenous source of infection, which needs to be investigated by swabbing all staff and work surfaces. It may need temporary ward closure and a deep clean to eradicate the infection source. Now that patients are discharged more quickly after surgery and many procedures are performed as day cases, many cysts are missed by the surgical team unless they undertake a prolonged and carefully audited follow-up with primary care doctors. Suppurative wound infections take 7 to 10 days to develop, and even cellulitis around wounds caused by invasive organisms, such as beta hemolytic streptococcus, takes 3 to 4 days to develop. Major surgical infections with systemic signs, figure 5.13, evidence of spreading infection, cellulitis or bacteremia need treatment with appropriate antibiotics. The choice may need to be empirical initially but is best based on culture and sensitivities of isolates harvested at surgery or from culture of wound fluids or wound swabs. Although the identification of organisms in surgical infections is necessary for audit and wound surveillance purposes, it is usually 2 to 3 days before sensitivities are known, figures 5.14 and 5.15. It is illogical to withhold antibiotics until results are available, but if clinical response is poor by the time sensitivities are known, then antibiotics can be changed. Such changes are unusual if the empirical choice of antibiotics is sensible. Change of antibiotics promotes resistance and risks complications, such as C. diff, enteritis. If an infected wound is under tension, or there is clear EV 250,240. Dents of suppuration, sutures or clips need to be removed, with curettage if necessary, to allow pus to drain adequately. In severely contaminated wounds, such as an incision made for drainage of an abscess, it is logical to leave the skin open. Delayed primary or secondary closure can be undertaken when the wound is clean and granulating, figures 5.16 and 5.17. Some heavily infected wounds may be left to heal by secondary intention, with no attempt at closure, particularly where there is a loss of skin cover and healthy granulation tissue develops. While the end result may be excessive scarring, that can always be revised with plastic surgery under clean surgical conditions at a later stage. Surgical incisions through infected or contaminated tissues. Filled circle when possible. Tissue or pus for culture should be taken before antibiotic cover is started. Filled circle. The choice of antibiotics is empirical until sensitivities are available. Figure 5.15. After 5 heavily contaminated wounds are best managed by delayed primary or secondary closure. When taking pus from infected wounds, specimens should be sent fresh for microbiological culture. Swabs should be placed in transport medium, but the larger the volume of pus sent, the more likely is the accurate identification of the organism involved. Providing the microbiologist with as much information as possible and discussing the results with them gives the best chance of the most appropriate antibiotic treatment. If bacteremia is suspected, but results are negative, then repeat specimens for blood culture and an immediate gram stain. Topical antiseptics should only be used on heavily contaminated wounds for a short period to clear infection, as they inhibit epithelial ingrowth and so impair wound healing. Antimicrobial treatment of surgical infection. Principles. Figure 5.16a. Antimicrobials may be used to prevent or treat established surgical infection. The use of antibiotics for the treatment of established surgical infection ideally requires recognition and determination of the sensitivities of the causative organisms. Antibiotic therapy. Should not be held back if it is indicated, the choice being empirical and later modified depending on microbiological findings on culture and sensitivity. Once antibiotics have been administered, it may not be possible to grow bacteria from the wound, and so the opportunity to ascertain the most appropriate antibiotic sensitivities is lost if a patient's condition does not improve on empirical antibiotic therapy. Antibiotics alone are rarely sufficient to treat cysts, which may also need open drainage and debridement. Principles for the use of antibiotic therapy. Filled circle. Antibiotics do not replace surgical drainage of infection. Filled circle. Only spreading infections or signs of systemic infection justify the use of antibiotics. Filled circle. Whenever possible, the organism and sensitivity should be determined. There are two approaches to antibiotic treatment. A narrow-spectrum antibiotic may be used to treat a known sensitive infection. For example, MRSA, which may be isolated from pus, is usually sensitive to vancomycin or teicoplanin, but not flucloxacillin. Combinations of broad-spectrum antibiotics can be used when the organism is not known or when it is suspected that several bacteria, acting in synergy, may be responsible for the infection. For example, during and following emergency surgery requiring the opening of perforated or ischemic bowel, any of the gut organisms may be responsible for subsequent peritoneal or bacteremic infection. In this case, a broad-spectrum antibiotic such as teicoplanin or meropenem, which are effective against a wide range of aerobic bacteria, is combined with metronidazole, which is effective against anaerobic bacteria. Alternatively, triple therapy is used with amoxicillin, gentamicin and metronidazole. The use of such broad-spectrum antibiotic strategies should be guided by specialist microbiological advice. If clinical response is poor after 3 to 4 days, there should be a re-evaluation with a review of available culture and sensitivity results and further investigations requested to exclude the development or persistence of infection such as a collection of pus. In surgical units in which resistant Pseudomonas or other gram-negative species, such as Klebsiella, have become resident opportunists, it may be necessary to rotate anti-pseudomonal and anti-gram-negative antibiotic therapy. Treatment of commensals that have become opportunist pathogens filled circle. They are likely to have multiple antibiotic resistance filled circle. It may be necessary to rotate antibiotics. Antibiotics used in treatment and prophylaxis of surgical infection. Antimicrobials may be produced by living organisms, antibiotics, or by synthetic methods. Some are bactericidal, e.g., penicillins and aminoglycosides, and others are bacteriostatic, e.g. tetracycline and erythromycin. In general, penicillins act upon the bacterial cell wall and are most effective against bacteria that are multiplying and synthesizing new cell wall materials. The aminoglycosides act at the ribosomal level, preventing or distorting the production of proteins required to maintain the integrity of the enzymes in the bacterial cell. Hospital and formulary guidelines should be consulted for doses and monitoring of antibiotic therapy. Penicillin. Benzylpenicillin has proved most effective against GRIM. There are two approaches to antibiotic treatment. Positive pathogens, including most streptococci, the Clostridia and some of the staphylococci that do not produce beta-lactamase. It is still effective against actinomyces, which is a rare cause of chronic wound infection. It may be used specifically to treat spreading streptococcal infections. Penicillin is valuable even if other antibiotics are required as part of multiple therapy for a mixed infection. Some serious infections, e.g. gas gangrene, require high-dose intravenous benzylpenicillin. Flucloxacillin. Flucloxacillin is resistant to beta-lactamases, and is therefore of use in treating infections with penicillinase-producing staphylococci that are resistant to benzylpenicillin, but it has poor activity against other pathogens. It has good tissue penetration and therefore is useful in treating soft tissue infections and osteomyelitis. Ampicillin, amoxicillin and co-amoxiclav. Ampicillin and amoxicillin are beta-lactam penicillins and can be taken orally or may be given parenterally. Both are effective against Enterobacteriaceae, Heterococcus faecalis and the majority of group D streptococci, but not species of Klebsiella or Pseudomonas. Clavulanic acid has no antibacterial activity itself, but it does inactivate beta-lactamases, so can be used in conjunction with amoxicillin. The combination is known as co-amoxiclav and is useful against beta-lactamase producing bacteria that are resistant to amoxicillin on its own. These include resistant strains of Staphylococcus aureus, Escherichia coli, Haemophilus influenzae, bacteroids and Klebsiella. Piperacillin and ticagrelin. These are uridopenicillins with a broad spectrum of activity against a broad range of gram-positive, gram-negative and anaerobic bacteria. Both are used in combination with beta-lactamase inhibitors, tazobactam with piperacillin and clavulanic acid with ticagrelin. They are not active against MRSA but are used in the treatment of septicemia, hospital-acquired pneumonia and complex urinary tract infections, where they are active against Pseudomonas and Proteus spp, and have a synergistic effect when used with aminoglycosides such as gentamicin. Cephalosporins. There are several beta-lactamase susceptible cephalosporins that are of value in surgical practice. Cefuroxime, sfotaxime and ceftazidime are widely used. The FRST2 are most effective in intra-abdominal skin and soft tissue infections, being active against Staphylococcus aureus and most Enterobacteriaceae. As a group, the Enterococci, Streptococcus faecalis, are not sensitive to the cephalosporins. Ceftazidime, although active against the gram-negative organisms in Staphylococcus aureus, is also effective against Pseudomonas aeruginosa. These cephalosporins may be combined with an aminoglycoside, such as gentamicin, if gram-negative cover is needed, and an imidazole, such as metronidazole, if anaerobic cover is needed. Aminoglycosides gentamicin and tobramycin have similar activity and are effective against gram-negative Enterobacteriaceae. Gentamicin is effective against many strains of Pseudomonas, although resistance has been recognized. All aminoglycosides are inactive against anaerobes and streptococci. Serum levels immediately before and 1 hour after intramuscular injection must be taken and repeated at 48 hours after the start of therapy, and dosage should be modified to satisfy peak and trough levels. Ototoxicity and nephrotoxicity may follow sustained high toxic levels and therefore single, large doses may be safer. Vancomycin and teicoplanin. These glycopeptide antibiotics are most active against gram-positive aerobic and anaerobic bacteria and have proved to be effective against MRSA, so are often used as prophylactic antibiotics when there is a high risk of MRSA. They are ototoxic and nephrotoxic, so serum levels should be monitored. They are effective against C. diff in cases of pseudomembranous colitis. Carbapenems. Meropenem, ertapenem and imipenem are members of the carbapenems. They are stable to beta-lactamase, have useful broad-spectrum anaerobic as well as gram-positive activity and are effective for the treatment of resistant organisms, such as ESBL-resistant urinary tract infections or serious mixed-spectrum abdominal infections, peritonitis. Metronidazole. Metronidazole is the most widely used member of the imidazole group and is active against all anaerobic bacteria. It is particularly safe and may be administered orally, rectally or intravenously. Infections caused by anaerobic cocci and strains of bacteroides and Clostridia can be treated, or prevented, by its use. Metronidazole is useful for the prophylaxis and treatment of anaerobic infections after abdominal, colorectal and pelvic surgery and in the treatment of C. diff, pseudomembranous colitis. Ciprofloxacin. Quinolones, such as ciprofloxacin, have a broad spectrum of activity against both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria but are particularly useful against Pseudomonas infections. Many UK and European hospitals have restricted their use as a preventive measure against the development of C. diff, enterocolitis.